Hey guys, I wanted to go over a build I've made for Fulminating Concoction. Really quick, I just want to talk about the difference between Fulminating Concoction and Shattering Concoction. For all intents and purposes, this tree and this build works both on Shattering and Fulminating Concoction. My build is a little bit more optimized towards being Fulminating Concoction, but I will showcase myself doing a breach on Shattering Concoction to show you that it works just the same. So it's really preference on which one you pick. To quickly go over why you would pick either one, Shattering Concoction is the freeze concoction, and so it freezes monsters, which can be very satisfying and help you become a little bit more safe in maps. The other thing that is nice about freezing concoction is Shattering Concoction is that it has a higher base crit chance, so by default it does a little bit more damage than Fulminating Concoction on first hit. Now, if we compare that to Fulminating Concoction does have a lower base crit chance, but it does shock, so after you hit a monster once, it'll have a 70% ish shock debuff applied to it. That'll mean that it'll take 70% more damage after you hit it once. So Fulminating Concoction ends up being a lot more damage because of that. On top of that, crits always take the highest roll, and so since crits always take the highest roll, a lightning skill will naturally benefit the most from that because lightning skills have the highest variable rolls. So I think overall Fulminating Concoction is the best for bossing, but Shattering Concoction can clearly be taken in maps as a preference, and it will perform just as well. Okay, let's talk about the Herald tech that's in this build. One of the biggest problems with concoction skills right now is that concoction skills are extremely high damage and they feel great to play. They have a problem though where they only clear in a small targeted area, and when it comes to clearing a map, running around targeting every single thing in the map can be rather tedious, can take a lot of time, and can be slow. Especially when you're doing breaches and you have a short amount of time to kill a ton of monsters. And I was originally playing ruetoo's Poison Concoction build, and I was running into an issue where really juice maps, I just could not clear things very quickly. I was clearing them and my damage was fine, and I was doing T4 bosses, all that, and Poison Concoction was working great. But when it came to very high mob density things, I was having to wait a long time for my corpse walkers to do the damage for me because there isn't any built-in clear to Poison Concoction as a build to counteract the super high density stuff. It works in the high density stuff, but it doesn't excel. So I made this build specifically to take advantage of a Herald tech. So I took my build that I was following for ruetoo and turned it into a build that can utilize the Herald tech that Fubgun mentions in one of his videos. If you want a super detailed explanation, you can go to his YouTube video and get the explanation, and I'm pretty sure he got it from another creator too, and you can maybe go see the original creator's video on how the Herald tech works. Basically, the long story short of it is if you get enough flat damage on all your pieces, the reason my quiver has a lot of flat damage is because I need it to do as much as possible for my heralds. We need our heralds to do a decent amount of damage. If you don't have a lot on your quiver, your rings and your gloves can make up for what you don't have on your quiver. But if you get enough flat damage in the build, your heralds will do a lot of damage. And if you have that damage and you use these links, where we're essentially making it so our herald does lightning damage. The cold mastery link is not necessary, by the way. I'm just doing that for extra damage. The other 5 are. So if you have these 4 links in Herald of Ice, and you have these 4 links in Herald of Thunder, then your heralds will proliferate with themselves as long as you have some freeze buildup and some shock chance on your tree. You need some shock chance, so we're getting it right here at the monk starting area, we're taking this 45% shock chance, and we need some freeze buildup. We have this 35% here in these 2 points. If you have less cold damage, you need more. So you might need more than this in cold damage, or in freeze buildup. But yeah, basically we're using these nodes as well as these links to make the heralds proc each other. So when a monster dies from my Fulminating Concoction, it starts a loop where my Heralded Thunder will go off because I killed a shocked enemy. My Heralded Thunder will kill an enemy, which the Heralded Thunder does almost exclusively cold damage, and the Heralded Thunder killing an enemy with cold damage means it'll shatter, because it will freeze it when it kills it, and when it shatters, the Herald of Ice will proc. The Herald of Ice will do lightning damage, which will shock and proc the Herald Thunder. So they proc each other back and forth until the whole screen is dead or there are monsters low health still alive. And this is the combo that really makes clearing amazing, and you can see it showcased in the video. Alright, let's explain the gear real quick. First of all, Widow Hail, the linchpin of the build. Basically, we need a Widow Hail to increase the effect of our quiver. And the reason we need to increase the effect of our quiver is because projectile gems, projectile skills, can be rolled on the quiver. And you can see on our Fulminating Concoction, we have plus 13 from global modifiers. 10 of these levels are from the quiver. Now we get plus 2 from the quiver itself, and then we have 400% quiver effect total. 286 is from the Widow Hail, 86 is on the tree, and the rest is in some jewels that I have throughout the tree. My suggestion is don't go for 400% because it can be quite expensive to get that last 50%. What you can do instead, however, is buy a 270% Widow Hail, which can be anywhere between 1 to 3 defines, depending on if you're looking for sockets or not. So you get a 270% Widow Hail, and then you take these passes on the tree, and you'll hit the 350% breakpoint. So you'll be 1 less level than my Fulminating Concoction, but you will still be a very high Fulminating Concoction level, and you will be able to clear everything fine. In terms of the mods now, let's now talk about the quiver and what we're multiplying. So obviously we need the plus 2 all projectile skills. That is a must-have in the build. We are scaling this build through crit chance, similar to ruetoo's poison build, and so we need to make sure that our skills are critting. So our quiver needs to have crit chance. So crit chance implicit is the easiest place to do that. The only other implicit that is good on a quiver is attack speed. So you either want crit chance or attack speed on your quiver implicit. And if you're going the crit version of this build like us, you need crit chance somewhere. So if you get attack speed on the implicit, make sure you get crit chance as an actual modifier. Now, what else do you want on your quiver? If you want the Herald tech that I mentioned earlier in the video to work, you need a lot of flat damage on the quiver. The flat damage can be any type of flat damage because we use our supports to make it do the specific elements. So if you have a lot of physical damage, for example, on your quiver, it will be okay because a lot of that will be gained as lightning or cold damage for the sake of the Herald. That being said, the most important elemental damage from the quiver are cold and lightning, and your Heralds will benefit the most from that because they don't need to go through any sort of conversions or multipliers to get to the other things. And conversions in PoE 2 actually function a lot differently from PoE 1, so conversion doesn't usually make the damage go up that well, like it did in PoE 1. So flat damage, very important in the quiver. And then the other mods that are important are either crit bonus with attack damage or damage with bow skills. Both are relatively competitive with each other. This quiver I have in my inventory has a lower crit chance, so keep that in mind. You can see the one with crit bonus does a lot more, partially because it has more crit chance, but also because damage with bow skills is adding into the additive pool of your character. So basically additive pools are anything that doesn't say more. So like increased attack damage is an additive thing. So this is increased attack damage, this increased elemental damage. There's some like this, increased lightning damage, etc., etc. Basically, those are your additive pool. So they don't multiply with each other and all the other things. And so there's a diminishing returns on that type of damage. So the bow skills does work on concoction skills, and it is a bugged interaction that a lot of people are using to scale their concoction skills currently. But do keep in mind that when we're talking about multipliers, multipliers will almost always be better than additive multipliers, or additive, additive damage properties. And so since this is additive, it will be worse than crit bonus. So I would say get crit bonus because it's a suffix, meaning you can focus more on getting flat damage in the prefixes and then use your suffixes to get the rest of the piece. Getting a quiver like this might be difficult, especially if my video gets popular, because projectile skills and crit bonus and crit chance are already like sought after mods. The only reason these quivers weren't extremely expensive right now is because everybody is going for this increased damage with bow skills because all the other concoction builds are recommending it. But I would say that you can easily go without it. And yes, the best in slot quiver would have damage with bow skills instead of fire damage to attacks, and they would just have higher tier modifiers with the other two. But that is like almost impossible to get, whereas this quiver right now that I have is a 6 mod quiver that gives me all upsides, and it was only like 3 divines, I believe. So yeah, the quiver is a really important piece. I would say spend a lot of your budget on it. If you're planning to spend, 10 divines when you build this character, I would say spend 5 of them on the quiver and spend 5 on the rest of the build. You can easily get like settle pieces in every slot for exalts. The Widow Hail you might need to spend a couple divine on if you want a 270. If you're not going for 270, 50% lower is all you need. So you get a 220 for a couple exalts very easily. You get a 220 with 3 sockets for a couple exalts, and have a relatively competitive bow for exalts. The rest of the gear is really simple. I'm just going to scroll over it real quick. I'm going for rarity and evasion and energy shield on as many pieces as possible. So if you're interested in the specific types of mods I have on my pieces, that's what they are. A little quick note I would like to make is, let's say you can't find a quiver with a lot of flat damage for whatever reason. You'll notice that my Herald damage is very dependent on that quiver, but if we look at something like this, 1 to 20, 1 to 15 damage with lightning attacks, that is a fairly low modifier on lightning attacks. They can go much higher than this. If I take this out, my damage with my Heralds goes up 600. So just a simple mod like that on the rings can counteract you not having them on your quiver. And you can get way better ones also. Let me just show you a quick example of one. So this ring has 1 to 60 damage to lightning with attacks. So we just compared that with the 1 to 15. That makes our damage of our Heralds go up by over 1500. So if you have a bad quiver in terms of flat damage, you can make up for it on your rings. Alright, that is the gear. Alright, next thing I would like to go over is the passive tree. This passive tree is generic right now, so there are things you can do to make it do more damage on bosses if you take out all of these points. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 points. You can put them back into here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You need one more somewhere. Take it off here, here. If you take these two nodes plus this node, your damage will almost double. You will just lose the effect of your heralds. And when you're doing a boss, you don't need your heralds to be working. So let's say you're going to do the breach boss. You can take all these points out, put those in, and double your damage and kill a T4 breach boss in seconds. I usually don't do that. I have killed a lot of T4 breach bosses at this point, and I don't bother to change it, but that is an option. If you're fighting one of the harder bosses that isn't the breach boss, like the ritual boss or the delirium boss, the delirium boss actually isn't a boss, and not the delirium boss, or an expedition boss or something of that nature, then you could spec into these to be a little bit more safe on how much damage you have for it. And it'll make you kill it a lot faster. This build does not one-shot Orbiter of Ash on a T4 difficulty, does not one-shot a T4 Zesh on T4. It probably does about the same amount of damage that ruetoo was showing on his initial Poison Concoction build, where it essentially will one-shot a T1 version of any boss, but at T4 it is a lot slower for sure. And that's because I've opted to scale the Heralds more so than I have to scale the single target DPS. If you're wanting to scale the single target DPS, there are plenty of ways to do that, and you could do it with the same exact gear you have on, but that is not the purpose of what I'm trying to showcase today. Alright, let's go over the skills real quick. Skills, relatively simple. Scattershot, it makes it have 2 more projectiles. These projectiles can shotgun, so as long as your mouse is in the middle of the monster, it is taking 3 times the damage because you have Scattershot. Close quarters, 25% more damage when you're close. Martial tempo, more attack speed. Lightning mastery, +1 to skill gems. Shock siphon, it gives us ES when we're clearing maps. If you want to take out shock siphon and put lightning mastery instead for bosses, it'll give you 25% more damage. We'll take mark. It gives us base crit on the monster, persistence to make it last longer. We'll take mark also increases the effectiveness of shock on the monster, and what that means is that we will pretty much have a maxed out shock when we are hitting a monster, when we're hitting a boss. Eye of Winter applies critical weakness for us. It costs a ton of mana because the projectile levels that we're getting also apply to it. This is the only skill we use that costs a lot of mana, so we really don't worry that much about it, but it, just so you know, don't spam it too much because you will quickly go Arcane Tempo, Unleash, Inspiration. I already went over the Heralds in the Herald section. Wind Dancer gives us more evasion. It gives us a lot more evasion. If we look at my character sheet, I have 92% evasion. If I take Wind Dancer off, it's at 87. This gives us 5% increased evasion at the high end of evasion, which is a ton. Ghost Dance makes us recover energy shield when we're hit, and so basically if a monster gets through our evasion, he's going to recover us 5% of our evasion. Our evasion is 30,000, so that means we're getting 1,500 energy shield every time a hit slips through. So we're recovering half our energy shield every time we get hit. So even if we get hit 5 times in 1 second and they're all big hits, we'll stay at big energy shield as long as we have Ghost Shrouds up. So Ghost Shroud makes us a lot less susceptible to physical damage and us getting unlucky. Grim Feast just gives us overcap on our energy shield. It makes it so our 3k energy shield can get all the way up to 6k, which will help us live through those big on-death effects that will randomly happen in an easy map that we're not thinking too much about. If you are doing a boss, you can take Grim Feast off and put on Alchemist Moon. Alchemist Moon gives us flask recovery, and it makes our life flask better. Okay, last thing I wanted to go over is the weapon swap. Our weapon swap are these green nodes. So there's 3 parts that we take points in. There's these mark nodes, there's these mark nodes, there's these mark nodes. So all of these give us a bunch of cool effects to our marks, like marked enemies take 10% more damage, Quelling Strike when you mark, 4% increased movement speed if you used a mark recently. Mark skills have 60% duration, enemies marked have reduced accuracy. So all these mark nodes are very, very great and helps us really destroy bosses that we've put marks on. So this is the weapon swap. Right now I just have a Widow Hail. It's the lower roll in my offhand from before when I had a worse Widow Hail before I upgraded the build. And I have one of my old quivers that has Dex on it. That way when I swap, I'm not completely losing everything in my build. If I accidentally throw a concoction while I'm on the side, it won't do no damage, because you can't make your concoction auto swap like you can other skills, since it's an unarmed attack. So what I do currently is I make it so my mark always casts in hand 2, and my Eye of Winter casts on hand 1. So what I do is I switch by pressing mark, and then I can blink around, and then when I'm back to hitting monsters, I press my Eye of Winter, and I go back to doing my concoction. Right, this is a T16. You can see item level 82. It is this map, so it has a boss, a ritual, Irradated, Corrupted, Breach. So this is the hardest content you can get for maps, and we are doing Fulminating Concoction with, let's show the rarity, 230% rarity. Alright, here goes. Unfortunate place for Breach, but